Everyone, welcome to the reality show brought to you by the Ayn Rand Centre UK. This is the Tuesday edition because we're on every weekday night doing the reality show and many other shows as well on this channel, bringing you the objectivist position, or at least our objectivist perspective on news, current affairs and just about everything under the sun. And at the moment we're continuing our coverage and focus on the war in Israel. And we've got two very serious topics for you tonight. But let me first introduce my fellow panelists. So I'm Richard, he's Marco, in case you ever wonder which way around that is. And we're also joined by Anders Ingemarson, the author, public speaker and educator, and by Matthew Humphreys, our resident legal expert and a defence lawyer here in London. So the two topics we're going to be discussing tonight are very serious topics, and they're topics that you probably won't hear anywhere else, which is part of what I think we're going to need to analyse why that is.
Later on, we'll be talking about the fact that 150 representatives of major religions in Israel have gathered to witness footage from October the 7th attack, and we'll discuss their reaction.
But our main topic tonight, the one we're going to be starting with here, is about it's about the director of a hospital in northern Gaza, in a city called Jabalia. And this particular guy, who is the chief of the hospital, has been interviewed by IDF. He's been under interrogation and interviewed and given a lot of details. And he has confessed that Hamas make use of the hospital to hide their forces. He's also detailed how staff of the hospital are also military operatives. And he's been talking about how hostages and fighters are transported around in ambulances as they think they'll be safe from being attacked. There's other details on this, but I think that one of the key things is that he himself, the chief of this hospital, was recruited as a brigadier general by Hamas in 2010. So he was actually both a Hamas member and the head of the hospital, which definitely blows apart some of the doubts that have been cast relentlessly by much of the media all around the place. So let me come to you, Anders, first of all. What were the details of this story which particularly struck you in terms of confirmation of what we've been told by Israel all along?
Well, I think that anybody who just have a foot in reality, this is just a confirmation of what we have known all along. So no surprise there at all, actually. Now, with the people who doubt every piece of evidence that is coming out of Gaza on behalf of the Israelis, I'm sure they will be able to spin this as well as something that is fabricated and so on and so forth. So I'm not sure it's moving the needle really on the positions on either side.
Did it provide a clearer details and a picture for you of imagining how the hospitals actually function and interact with Hamas?
Well, the piece that was new to me, but in retrospect, when you think about it, makes completely sense from a Hamas point of view, and that is just to shuttle their fighters and the hostages around in ambulances. They're basically hiding under the cover of hospitals and facilities that in normal times would be completely out of question. I mean, they're breaking every law and custom of war, if there is such a thing. But I mean, it's entirely consistent with everything that we know that Hamas stands for. So no surprise there.
Yeah. Matthew, how shocked are you by these revelations?
Not shocked in the least. It's as Anders was just saying, it's confirmation of what certainly what Israel's been saying for a long time, and what I think any reasonable person would have guessed was actually going on, that Hamas are actually using these hospitals and trying to use that to avoid detection, to avoid military action. And of course, Hamas, taking this at face value, have actually breached the Geneva Convention by using hospitals for military purposes. Israel, of course, were criticised a few weeks ago because they raided Al-Shifa hospital on the basis that they had evidence that Hamas were using that hospital in a similar fashion. I think I did raise at the time that the Geneva Convention makes clear that if a hospital is being used for a military purpose, then the protection under the Geneva Convention actually ends, because at that point, the other side in the conflict are permitted to take reasonable military action to deal with the threat.
Yeah, yeah. As Anders mentioned a few seconds ago, anyone with with eyes open and not bananas ears knew about this ages ago. The explosion in the car park, and as you said, Matthew, the fact that Israel had been saying this for years, and the tunnels and all the equipment that is being found in mosques and schools is a confirmation of what we all suspected or even knew. So, how do you think does this affect the people who refuse to believe news and stuff like that? Do you think it's going to make any difference?
Is that directed at me? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Matthew.
No, that's fine. I suspect it's not going to make much difference at all to a lot of people. There may, I'm sure there will be exceptions to that, but a lot of people seem very, very much entrenched in their positions, and I think there are people out there who will try and somehow rationalise this away, or just not, just sort of ignore what's coming out, and will just keep on as they have been with a sort of anti-Israel kind of sentiment.
Yeah. Just before I come back to you, Anders, can I just ask you another question, Matthew? What were you saying there about the Geneva Convention and the fact that the hospital is essentially no longer treated as a hospital by this point because it's essentially being used for military purposes? Would you expect, or is there any framework for anyone to announce officially that there is proof of that and that therefore it is a legitimate target, even if that's one of these bodies such as, those we're less favorable to, such as the UN or whatever? You ever see a situation where anybody would say, yes, this hospital is a legitimate target? Because that seems to be the enormous hurdle between reality and actually being able to do something about it.
I don't think there is a specific body as such. I mean, if there is some sort of international investigation after all of this is over, then one would hope the evidence is properly considered at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this story, there were also information about the fact that interrogations are taking place of captured people from Israel, both military people and in the past we've heard of hostages being held in hospitals. So, Anders, what would you think about that aspect of it, and also what we saw initially about the footage that the IDF showed about Al-Shifa? Showing military staff ferrying hostages around within the hospital and where weapons cache were stored and that kind of thing. There was such a lot of doubt cast over the validity or sufficiency of that evidence to justify the actions according to Israel's detractors. Do you think this particular example of what this chief of hospital and Hamas chief has said will move the needle at all? Do you think it will help at all in terms of affecting people's opinion of what Israel's been saying?
It's hard to say. I mean, as the evidence piles up, and I'm sure we will have more of these kind of revelations coming out, It may move the needle a little bit, but I think for the people who are set or who are bought into the narrative that this is a fight for the rights and freedom of the Palestinian people, they won't, as long as that fundamental notion is not challenged and not changed, I don't think they will change their mind. And actually, I was thinking, I'm sure there are people out there, probably in the minority, but they could even spin this and say, yeah, of course you use ambulances, of course you use hospitals. I mean, anything goes in the fight for Palestinian freedom. So yeah, I maybe, as I said, when more and more evidence comes out, it may change the minds of some people, but this, just a single instance like this, I don't think does much of a difference.
And since people are always focusing on the humanitarian aspect of it as they see this, and the civilian health aspect, and one of the things that this interview brought out was the fact that these hospitals and these ambulances that are used by Hamas fighters don't go to help the injured on the streets of Gaza. They deliberately avoid them and will refuse to go even when doctors ask for them to go, because they've got other duties, which is essentially the military duties of facilitating Hamas's efforts. Did that come as a surprise, or does that?
No, not at all. I mean, Hamas, we know that Hamas, the purpose of Hamas is not a concern for the Palestinian people. I mean, the Palestinian people is just a part of the chessboard, if you like, and they're completely willing to sacrifice their people if it meets their ends, which is from the river to the sea. So
yeah. And one of the aspects I noticed is that when I searched for this guy's name on the internet to see where this story had been picked up. Now, our source for the story is in the Times of Israel, I believe. But looking at what other newspapers and news organizations had picked up on the story and chosen to cover it, there was almost none. I could find it was covered in the Daily Mail here in the UK, which is a right-leaning newspaper, but the Daily Mail tends to pick up any news uncritically and puts it forward. So you'll find alongside it equally news from Hamas itself, essentially, with their latest press release of what they claim are the number of deaths, etc. So and that undiscerning nature of it doesn't give the fact they included it much credence. But the fact that many of the main organizations, including the BBC, don't seem to mention it at all, nor do American media, so far as I could see from the initial search. How do we stop the fact that the truth is held back on one side and pushed forward on the other side to such an unbalanced extent? What do you make of that, Anders?
Yeah, so in this particular case, I didn't check the date on the article, but when was this revealed, this piece of item?
It was today.
It's today. It's fresh news.
It's today, so it's fresh off. So to give some of the news outlets the benefit of the doubt, hopefully they've been burned a little bit by accepting too readily some of the information coming out. So maybe they're doing some fact checking, and we will see some coverage of it here in the US. I would expect Fox News to cover it. Not so much the others maybe, but yeah, well, I guess we'll see in the next couple of days if it will be silenced or if there will be some information coming out.
Yeah, so it's a usual MO really. The left is much more reluctant to reveal anything which might damage the Palestinian cause.
I mean, that might be, well, yeah, that too, but also then in terms of their own reputation, and I mean they have obviously taken a hit, and it may be wishful thinking on my part, but hopefully they do their due diligence before they publish something.
What actually strikes me with this piece of news is, first of all, the confirmation of what, as I said earlier, we already knew, but also, again, confirmation of how Israel is expected to abide by the rules totally without ever going wrong by a iota, and at the same time, how Hamas is not fighting on the same terms. These guys, as you mentioned, Anders, these guys see their aim, their final result, as the only thing that counts. So they're not gonna use our altruism in the same way we use it in their favor. They will exploit it. They will exploit everything that they could possibly exploit. Our tendency not to hit civilian targets, hospitals, schools, and mosques and stuff like that. They will exploit that to the last second in order to take an advantage on the Western way of dealing with, even in the context of war. And I wish people realized that we are no longer living in Victorian times where the gentleman agreement is binding. These guys don't know rules apart from what they want to achieve. And I wish these kind of things will wake people up a bit.
Yeah, and as I understand it, these international rules of war or laws of war, whatever you make of them, I think that one of the foundations is that when you're talking about that the military personnel has to, when they have to be in uniform such to be covered by those rules of war. And I mean, here we're talking Hamas. They're hiding among the civilians. They're dressing like civilians. They appear and disappear on purpose. That's their strategy. So obviously, really no rules of war apply to them, but we don't hear much of that either. So.
Yeah, one of the aspects brought out here was that there seemed to be infrastructure within the hospital, not only just the tunnels underneath, etc., but phone lines to mosques on dedicated lines and other elements of Hamas infrastructure, which show that it's properly built in to the system and how it's been operating for some time. This isn't one, because as I mentioned earlier, where those weapons cache were found in the other hospital, the accusation was they'd literally been put there before it had been filmed by IDF. Well, none of that can be true when tracing things like tunnels and the infrastructure, which proves that it's a long-term established links between and necessary cover for Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Matthew, let me come to you, but let me just read out a few super chats because we have a few here. We have Mary-Aline for $3. Thank you very much, Mary-Aline. And I see you've got a question, which I'll come to again in a moment. Jonathan Honig, thank you very much for your $4.99. We appreciate it very much. And Bonnie Bertrand, thank you too for your 99 cents. Everything. All of these are helping enormously, and thank you very much. I know you're one of our most frequent supporters, Bonnie, so thank you. And Mary-Aline, your question was, Hamas imposes Sharia law in Gaza. Arabs are far better off in Israel. Hamas has no understanding of individual rights. Yes, it's a good point there, absolutely. Hamas does have absolutely no understanding of individual rights, and Israel is the better player for that. Matthew, if you want to respond to Mary-Aline's comment as well. And also, I'm interested in your thoughts on what the evasion of the truth tells us about what's going on in the wider picture here. The fact that people are continually being shown such evidence, as you're often presented evidence in court, and yet choosing to look the other way or refuse to accept it or quibble so extensively over facts on one side and take other hearsay as fact on the other. What do you think?
Well, there does seem to be something very sort of startling going on in a way, because I was on this show either last week or the week before, and we were talking about these people going along to these protests and chanting from the river to the sea and so forth. And it's quite clear from some of them being interviewed that some of them don't even understand the meaning of the chants. And, it almost seems like it's the sort of cause of the moment somehow that everyone's just supposed to agree with. Everyone's supposed to be on Gaza's side, and people are just not applying their mind or their rational faculty to the situation or to the evidence that's now coming out. Everyone's just got swept up in the cause and all the protests and so forth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Anders, do you think there is anything that the IDF is missing in terms of how it can present its side of what's going on? Are there any techniques which can allow the truth to reach further than they have done so far, or are they simply up against such a big wall of resistance that that is what's preventing the truth from getting out?
Yeah, I think it's the wall of resistance. Yeah, I don't know what else they can do. I mean, just keep doing what they're doing, I guess, and hopefully it will eventually have an impact. But just to comment on the commenter, Marilyn, that Hamas doesn't understand individual rights. I think that is being too charitable to them. I mean, the foot soldiers probably don't, but if you look at the Hamas leadership and where they get their ideas from, I think many of them understand what individual rights are. They just reject it. It's contra to their philosophy, to the theocratic fundamentalism that they subscribe to. So yeah, don't let them get off the hook.
Yeah, and I think that's.
I mean, it's pure evil. That's what it is. It's not like, oops, I didn't know. In this case, and I'm sure that's not what Marilyn implied either. But I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, sure. And a lot of that's borne out, isn't it, by the fact that some of these leaders of Hamas live in considerable luxury by exploiting the aid they receive, and not in the Gaza Strip in the conditions that their people they compel their people to live in, but in places such as Qatar. That shows they understand fully what the difference is between the individual rights of everyone and what they're doing to exploit others through their authoritarian, theocratic behavior.
Yeah.
Thank you, John Was, for your contribution. Thank you very much. I just wanted to add that IDF is putting out lots of information and proof that this thing is going on. It's not just the interrogation of this guy. They also released intercepted communication on the radio of people confirming from Hamas that they're using ambulances in order to move their troops, their materials. And so it's not, I mean, IDF is doing really quite a lot in order to put information out there. Now, whether people choose to ignore it or not is a different issue. But in my experience, I haven't seen anything here in the West that reports this kind of information sources, let alone try and fact check. They're so passionate about this stuff lately, but they never seem to focus on the information put out there, which proves Israel points and even scrutinized by them. And that I find it quite frustrating. Information is out there. If you choose to look at it, even with a critical eye, help yourself, check it. Is it there? Is it true or not? But people tend to avoid the whole thing altogether in case they are found again, like it happens with the explosion at the car park of the hospital.
And Matthew, since you're in the UK, and I know that you watch the BBC, well, certainly more than we do, at least on occasion, in order to keep up with what they consider news. I'm curious to know whether you've seen any footage of the BBC has used of IDF footage, for example, showing the tunnel network and some of the facts which they've documented on video to demonstrate the validity of their position.
Yes, I think they have certainly shown the tunnel videos and some of the other stuff. I sort of got cut off very briefly earlier because there was some sort of glitch with my device, so apologies for that. I think Anders was, I think, just making a point that sort of more reputable Western news outlets maybe kind of fact checking what's just come out from the IDF today. I think certainly anything like that, the BBC would almost pride themselves on doing a very long, detailed fact check of before they actually broadcast it. So it may well be, to be fair to them, that they do actually end up reporting it at some point. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, they're probably waiting for Hamas to fact check that one for them, as usual.
But certainly there does seem to be an exceptional delay on that side, and already I've seen today on the live news stream on the BBC News website where they update in brief form everything that's going on at the moment, often with words like Israel claims that, or with all of those kind of caveats, and this isn't even in there under those provisos, whereas the latest figures by Hamas in terms of reported claims about number of deaths in the Gaza Strip is definitely on there, as it is nearly every day. So yeah, there's certainly yes, it's not a fair fight in many ways, is it? But yes, absolutely. I think when we were talking about the what the IDF can do, well, one of the things they can do and have been doing is showing more of this footage of what actually happened on October the 7th to different groups of individuals at different times, don't they? So this is really our second story.
Yeah. The news today is that 150 people from different religions have been shown this footage. This is part of the Israeli government and the working with the IDF in order to involve stakeholders and explain to them what they're doing and why they're doing it. And lo and behold, all these people who went in to see the footage came out quite shocked. And the initial claim was, oh, this has got nothing to do with religion. This is not the Islam I know about. Surely this is not human, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. Effectively, the implication is, yeah, it happened, but leave alone Islam, leave alone religion, because religion is just full of love. You know, it's like a Eurovision song, love, love, and peace, peace. How do you guys feel about it, Matthew? How did you see this? How do you analyze this news?
If increasing numbers of Muslims are genuinely coming to reject violence, by which I mean outright condemn what groups like Hamas and Islamic State, etc., get up to, surely that would be a good thing. It's a lot of I know people who are at least nominally Muslim who live in the West, and who I know, they're not particularly vocal about it, but they want absolutely nothing to do with these kinds of groups. They're quite shocked at some of what the terrorists get up to. They always tell me, it's not the real Islam. That's not what their religion supports. And if that kind of mindset progresses, surely that's a good thing in terms of the future of the Islamic world, one would hope.
But don't you think this is usually just an excuse? It's something easy that people say has got nothing to do with Islam, and at the same time, really, they don't really want to fight the claim Islam is. You never see, for example, after a terrorist attack, Islamic terrorist attack, you never see a group of Muslims going in the streets protesting against this Islamist that perverts the message from Islam. It's never happened, as far as I can tell.
There are a few who speak out, so maybe not. You maybe don't get huge crowds protesting, but certainly I've seen imams even speaking out and condemning the behaviour.
Yeah. Okay. Anders, I think these 150 different clergymen and representatives of different religions included Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and some other smaller groups. Many of them were understandably unable to see more than a few minutes of this footage, even at the beginning. I think the whole thing is like 45 minutes or an hour long, and because of the nature of how inhuman and hideous the content is, and how one of the things that lots of them point out is that it is not a movie, and you are watching the reality play out in front of you, and it's evident that that is the case. What is your initial response to their reactions, and the fact that how do we balance this combination of judging what's against humanity, and where religion plays into it on the other side as well?
Well, that's a big question, isn't it? Well, I don't doubt that they are serious in their reaction, because, and I have personally not watched any of this footage. I don't want to watch the footage. I don't need to watch the footage. But I think the essential part here is to understand, and here I don't think these clergymen understands it, is that, when two faiths clash, reason walks out the door. And religion taken to its extreme is always authoritarian. It's always violent, because when you can't reason someone into something, what do? You resort to violence, and that's what we're seeing here. And of course, there's a spectrum in every religion, and to the extent that it's tempered by the values of Western civilization, Enlightenment values, religion is a relatively, it's not benign. Benign is not the right word, but it's not threatening, because it plays by the rules of a civilized society. But once you put religion at the top and to be the ruling dogma, then what we see today is what happens. And it doesn't matter if it's Islam or Christianity or any other religion. It's part of the essence of faith, basically.
And since we can't really expect these clergymen at the point they come out of such a viewing to say, I'm in the wrong job, I've been promoting the wrong ideology, what is the best that we can hope as a response by them to seeing the footage in terms of what they then go out into the world and do?
Well, I think it's to the extent that they are, subscribed to the values of Western civilization and a separation of state and religion. I think they can probably do a lot of good in their congregations, but obviously we don't know how committed they are to that. I have my doubts, but we'll see.
I'm a bit skeptical about all that. Religion is effectively, if you are a religious person, you assume that the man is something that's is underneath a god, which can only be understood via somebody else. And this somebody else, his job is not necessarily to do good to humanity, but it's just to control people. As a religious person, I'm supposed to do and believe everything somebody else tells me, because they claim to speak on behalf of a God, which is unscrutable, unfindable, unprovable. So how can these guys actually, even if they subscribe to civilized society's rules, how are they going to do anything? How are they going to make things better anyway? Because in a way, it's just a matter of change the priest, and the new priest might decide, okay, let's go to war in the name of God. Can we rely on these guys to peddle the right stuff? What if there is a rogue one that decides to take power in their own hands and do an Hamas? Shouldn't we try and promote the idea that religion is actually abrogation of reason, and just stick to those lines? I hate giving a free pass to these religious guys, even if they do in their personal goodwill, because they want peace and love everywhere. The fact that you peddle religion means that at some point somebody will take advantage of it and use it to create havoc, like we've seen in the past and like we're seeing now.
And if I can turn to you for a moment, Matthew, one of the things that I think is essential about this footage generally and who it's shown to is that the people who most need to see this footage are probably those that are least likely to, or those that are likely to refuse to. And those that that will see this footage probably are already sufficiently open to the truth of what Israel has been saying for some time, to have already accepted that the events of October 7th happened in the way that Israel has outlined and shown to the world. Do you recognise that difficulty, that dilemma, and is there any way of encouraging? Even should we encourage more people to look at some of the source material to really have an appreciation for what sparked the whole events that we've now been witnessing for the last few months?
Well, there's always exceptions to everything, of course, but you do have people like Owen Jones, the leftist journalist in this country, who, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago on this show, he made a point of the fact that he had sat down and watched this footage. But from there, he put this whole thing on YouTube. It just goes completely downhill very quickly, because he'd almost made a list of key things that he'd seen, and he's kind of rattling them off and just really splitting hairs and sort of saying, we can't be sure, this shows this or that. So, even with the footage in front of him, he still seems to be denying certainly the extent of what went on October the 7th, if not the fact that something did happen. So people aren't necessarily going to change their minds even from viewing that footage. I don't think. I mean, at the end of the day, you can only suggest to people or offer to people to give them the opportunity to watch it. You can't force anyone to go and sit down and watch it, let alone actually sort of process it rationally and change their minds about anything afterwards.
And how do you think you tread the very difficult line of respecting the dignity of the victims and at the same time making sure that the message is understood and not covered up by being too polite or oversensitive about about those kind of concerns, when the important thing is to stress the extent of it in order to make sure that it doesn't happen again? I mean, do you think someone like Owen Jones or those of his ilk ought to be then taken up a level and shown more unedited footage, or are we just simply, is there never a cause for that? Should it always be a carefully curated but accurate representation to the maximum extent possible to get over the message?
I think it's a very difficult balance to strike in a way, because there is, I suppose, an issue of preserving the dignity of the dead, and I can understand why the IDF, or the Israelis rather, have edited the compilation, even when that's meant not being able to prove some of the more horrific stuff that seems to have gone on. But at the end of the day, I don't know how many people you're going to get to change their minds, irrespective of what you showed them, because I think some people seem to be just so dead set on defending the rights of the Gazans and seeing Israel as the bad guy that they're just they're just going to ignore whatever evidence comes out, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's, and I don't really have an opinion on what level of detail you should show here. I think it's a difficult question to answer, as Matthew is saying. But I think it's important to, whatever you end up showing, you have to set the context to it, and kind of explain why is this happening and what do we have to do. So to balance this, or not balance, but use it as a tool to ask the bigger questions, and ask these people, okay, which side are you coming down on? Are you coming down on Western civilization, or are you coming down on religion? You have to make a choice. You have to take a stand. And I don't know how these showings are set up, and if they do anything of that, but just showing these videos or this footage in a vacuum, I don't think it will have much of an impact in the long run.
Yeah. And you mentioned yourself earlier on, Anders, that this is not something you feel the need to watch yourself because you already understand the context and the situation. But do you use descriptions of it, or are there ever situations when you're encountering people in daily life who are more on the fence, or where you would encourage someone to go to the source material and look at this? Or is that something you think is hard to encourage anyone to do, knowing what the content includes?
Yeah, I haven't really been put in a situation where that has come up. So yeah, I guess there would be a context in which I would potentially recommend this, but only as part of the bigger picture. But I don't think you have to. I mean, if you have the right arguments, you don't need this footage. You can make your case without it.
Yeah.
And because you're an educator and you speak to public in different settings, have you ever come across somebody who from the start refused to even understand what the values at play here are, like civilization versus the dictatorship based on a theocracy?
I mean, not from the start in the sense that someone, has interrupted a speech or anything like that and refused to play along. There have been questions in Q&As, perhaps, but maybe I've been lucky. I haven't really run into any extreme opposition when I'm giving my talks and such.
That's good.
Well, I haven't been invited to Harvard either, so it's a.
And what about Matthew? I don't know the extent to which you use social media, but is that a place where you might encourage people to look at source material to get a proper understanding, particularly if they're spouting what is out and out nonsense?
Yeah, I'm not muted. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've not just relating to Israel and Gaza, but I've had a number of sort of discussions on social media over the years about various issues where I've had to sort of say to people, the evidence is here, the sources are here, go and look at the sources, guys, because they're just, they were talking out of such a place of total ignorance. I was actually getting frustrated, even continuing the debate with them. It was just.
Is part of the issue behind that the fact that the journalistic standards generally have disintegrated over time, and things, I loathe the term fake news and misinformation because they're so poorly applied most of the time, but there are genuine cases of both, and there's a lack of integrity within journalism compared with how they used to be some decades back, and you can see the descent of it over time. Do you think that's part of the underlying issue that's going on here, and therefore the inability for people to trust what they dislike as information rather than what they're assessing in terms of its authenticity?
Yeah, well, I think it's sort of the influence of kind of woke culture generally, actually, and I think the sort of phenomena you're talking about is probably part of it. That people just have these sort of set views that are sort of popular or fashionable, and people just think, well, that's what I should believe, that's the cause I should support, and there's no kind of critical thinking anymore, no, actual studying of the evidence or considering the wider principles for themselves.
Yeah, certainly.
Mm.
And Anders, if I can turn to you, I just want to focus on the religious aspect for 1 second, and the fact that what we have here at a wider level, just drawing back from the conflict for a moment, is essentially the endless fight between reason and faith, and the fact that we need to encourage more people to use reason as their source of acquiring and validating knowledge all the time. And I know you've written a book which looks at how to tell right from wrong and not get caught up in the political extents of the biases that are involved in the spectrum of people's opinions based on politics. What do you think are the key elements to succeeding in that tough task of making more people choose reason first?
Yeah, it's hard to. I mean, there obviously isn't just one way of doing this. I mean, I wrote the book, and I'm working on a third updated edition that will come out next year. What I have found encouraging recently, and I think there's been an uptick actually after the October 7th atrocities, is that more and more people are actually questioning the left and right. And the left's embrace of anti-Semitism, the extreme lefts, in this case, that has turned some heads, because the common perception is that is associated with white supremacy and the extreme right. And I have heard quite a few commentators saying, that making or drawing the conclusion that both sides are totalitarian, and we have to start to look at this a little bit more different. They are basically two faces of the same coin. So that I find encouraging, and I mean has been in political commentary, more intellectual circles. So it's probably not something that has spread widely yet, but I mean that's where it has to start. So.
Yeah, I don't want to be the voice of pessimism tonight. What I find disheartening is that the answer to say Islam caused this is another religion. So nobody seems to realize that the problem here is religion in the first place. It's not Islam versus Christianity or Buddhism versus something else. The problem is religion. Religion is its own nature, is built in to give support to somebody who wants to control people, somebody who wants to impose some sort of dictatorship, whether it's communism, whether it's a theocracy, it doesn't matter. In the end, the result is you are a slave to somebody's whim. And people, just look at the left and the right debate. The right is moving further towards the Christian end of the spectrum, saying that we need to fill this hole, this God-shaped hole, and all this kind of stuff. It's like, and I'm always screaming, no, that's not the solution. Move away from religion, embrace reason, embrace reality. But nobody seems to make this point, or is it just?
That's certainly there, both on the left and on the right. So on the left, it's more a secular faith, if there's such a thing, belief in environmentalism and wokeism and whatever it is. And on the right, it's more religiously focused. But I mean, you've seen, and now I'm speaking for the US primarily. I don't know how much this is an issue in Britain and in Europe, and how much is discussed, but there is certainly a reaction to the extreme left here, where people who have considered them selves, center left and so on, and in the past made common cause, or at least in some parts of the progressive agenda, and they have either been canceled or something like that, and started to question their allegiances. And I think here we have Barry Weiss and the Free Press, I think, is the poster child for that right now. But we have the same on the right. There are people on the right who are very concerned about where the American right is going, and the Republican Party has been completely hijacked by evangelical Trumpists, if you like, and people are looking for ways out of that and solutions. And I don't know if your European audience is familiar with David French. Used to write for the Dispatch. He's an evangelical. He is pro anti-abortion, but he's nowadays a commentator for the New York Times and a sharp critic of Trump ever since he came on the political scene back in 2015 or so. And so he's one example of that movement, to find or to return conservatism to a more enlightenment-based foundation, if you like. So there's still, whether you believe that is possible or not, that's a different question. But at least here in the US, I see some positive signs coming out of this. So again, I might be too starry-eyed, but we'll see.
Yeah, thank you, Marilyn, for another super chat. Matthew, I just want to quickly go back to you. As you well know, here in Britain, the head of state, the monarch, is also the head of the church. So for us, the separation is a bit harder. How do you think, Matthew, we could get to the point where at least religion, if no economy or other education or other things are moved away from the state? How do you think we can get rid of this monkey from our back?
Well, I think, as far as the Church of England goes, I don't think they actually care what their own beliefs are anymore. They're not particularly sort of doctrinaire about anything, and haven't been for a long time, as far as I can see. I don't think actually there would be that much opposition to it being disestablished, if that ever was to be suggested. I think it would actually end up happening pretty quickly if someone just sort of grasped the nettles with it. It's an open door, I think. It's just that people don't want to deal with it.
Yeah. And in order to try and, it's always nice if we can finish these shows on a slightly more positive note, despite the nature of what we're having to discuss here, because of these are the events that we're faced with. Do you think that the argument that this is shining a light on a lot of things that were hidden before, or that people chose to ignore before, and now they've got to make such an effort to ignore it that they can no longer be deemed innocent if they do so? Because, for example, when we see the makeup of the protesters on the streets of London and New York, when we see how colleges behave in the US, when we see how different parts of the media, whether the entertainment world or the media itself, or different parts of society respond to what's going on, what you're really seeing is what was already there before, just more clearly. So in a sense, there's no more anti-Semitism now than there was prior to October the 7th. It's just brought out into the light, and it is there available for people to see. Now, to call that a positive is pushing it a little, but at least that's the way forward, isn't it? At least that's the way for people to change. What do you think of that, Matthew?
It is, yeah. I mean, I do think we need to be a little bit careful about generalizing too much in terms of the why people are joining the protest or whatever. I mean, everyone's an individual. They've all got their own kind of context. I suppose, for want of a better term, they've all got their own frame of knowledge, mistaken as it may be. But yeah, I mean, I agree with the point you're making. Hopefully, sorry, I can't shake this cough tonight. Hopefully, things perhaps will gradually start to change, and people will start to grasp the evidence. But I don't know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, well, gentlemen, thank you very much for an interesting discussion. And would you like to mention the title of your book and how you said a new edition will be coming out in the foreseeable future? How can people best keep in touch?
Yeah, wherever you can check out. Amazon is probably available in a lot of countries nowadays. The title of the book is "Think Right or Wrong, Not Left or Right: A 21st Century Citizen Guide." You can find me at thinkrightorwrong.com, and I'm on Substack under also Think Right or Wrong. So there are plenty of opportunities to find me.
And I think Daniel has put all the details in the underneath here the video. To continue tonight, thank you, Christopher Smith, for a super chat. Later on tonight on Ayn Rand Centre UK YouTube channel is the Fountainhead Book Club. We've approached chapter 17 of part 4, so it's nearly the end of it, but you can still join ARCUK as a member to take part to this conversation, which I quite enjoy.
Yeah, and they're for members only, and they're really intimate discussions where we get really into the meat of each chapter and the detail of it. Yeah. And often Shoshana Milgram joins us for those discussions as well, most weeks. So we get all the added expertise that she brings to the picture as well. So please join us for that. That's coming up in 3 minutes' time. And other than that, I'd like to say thank you to both Matthew and to Anders and to our super chatters, especially to Marie-Aline for a record 3 super chats within the one show. Thank you very much, Marie-Aline, and to all the others, of course. We appreciate all of your contributions.
And the TDO and the TRS will be back tomorrow, same bad time, same bad channel.
Please join us then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.